You want to know what really keeps wealthy people wealthy when the sky starts darkening. It is not genius, it is not courage, it is not having a better app, a better broker, or some magical banker whispering tomorrow as headlines into your ear. I have watched brilliant people get wiped out, some of them once, some of them twice. A few of them so many times they began to confuse suffering with experience. The people who keep walking out of storms richer than when they entered are usually not the smartest people in the room. They are the people who respected the weather before the weather had a name. That is the line I want burned into your mind. The storm never introduces itself on time. By the time the newspapers agree on what to call it, by the time television panels put elegant language around it, by the time your neighbor starts telling you it is getting serious, the valuable part of preparation is already over. That is why I have always cared less about prediction than about readiness. And right now, when I look at the sky, I do not like what I see. I have not liked it for a while. The thing that worries me most is not that a recession might come. Recessions always come. The thing that worries me is how many people are standing out in open country with no coat, no cash, too much debt, too much confidence in their own comfort, and far too much faith that the good weather owes them one more year. It does not. Weather has no loyalty. Markets have no loyalty. Arithmetic has no loyalty. That is why I spent the last stretch of my active years doing something many people found embarrassing. I sold quietly, deliberately. Without apology, quarter after quarter, I built cash. By the time I stepped back, the pile had become so large that people turned it into a joke. They said the old man had gone soft. They said I had lost my nerve. They said I was watching a roaring market from the sidelines like a frightened spectator at his own party. They misunderstood the game. The game is not to look smartest during the good times. The game is to remain liquid, rational, and dangerous when other people lose all three. I was not trying to entertain Wall Street. I was trying to remain able to move when movement would finally matter. That is what cash is for. Cash is not a moral statement. Cash is not fear. Cash is deferred aggression. Most people only understand cash when they are running out of it. That is one reason they get punished by every cycle. They treat cash like dead money during a boom because dead money is how it feels when everyone else appears to be getting rich faster than you are. Then a break comes, prices crack, jobs wobble, debt bites, and suddenly the same people discover that cash was not dead at all. It was dormant power. And dormant power is one of the rarest things in a world that rewards noise over readiness. Now let me tell you what I see when I look around this economy. Not the television economy, not the social media economy, the real one. I see fragility, I see a jobs market losing confidence, I see small businesses, which are the spine of American employment, behaving like people who can already feel the floor moving under them. I see housing under pressure, I see consumer sentiment weakening, even while spending tries to keep up appearances. I see energy creeping through the system like poison in groundwater, and I see an entire market structure that spent far too long pretending price and value are the same thing. That is what bothers me, not one data point. The combination, storms are never one thing. They are systems of pressure. 1 weak signal can be ignored. 10 weak signals pulling in the same direction should not be ignored unless your goal is to suffer impressively. Oil is one of the biggest signs, and I want you to understand why, because people still make the childish mistake of thinking oil is mostly about what they pay at the pump. Number oil is a tax that moves through the entire economy, wearing different clothes. It raises shipping costs, it raises heating costs, it raises costs for manufacturers, it raises costs for farms, it raises costs for travel, it raises the cost of moving almost anything from where it begins to where it is used. It is not one higher bill, it is 1,000 quiet cuts. And the cruelest part is that the people most damaged by those cuts are usually the people least protected against them. You can call that inflation if you like, you can call it cost pressure, you can call it geopolitical risk. I call it arithmetic with a passport. If oil stays high long enough, the damage stops being theoretical. It becomes behavioral. People start pulling back, companies start hedging, confidence starts eroding, and what looked manageable at first begins feeding on itself. That is how pressure systems work. Now, I want to say something important, because every time anyone begins speaking plainly about risk, weak people assume he is trying to frighten them. I am not interested in fear. Fear is useless. Fear makes people sell good things at bad prices. Fear makes people rush into dumb shelters. Fear makes people mistake motion for action. I have watched fear destroy more wealth than recession ever did. Recessions wound balance sheets. Fear wounds judgment. And judgment is what determines who leaves a storm with more than they entered with. That is why when I think back to 2008, I do not remember my advantage as brilliance. I remember it as composure with ammunition. The market was convulsing. Ordinary investors were liquidating at prices that would later look ridiculous. They were not doing that because the underlying businesses had all become permanently impaired. They were doing it because they had no cushion, no plan, no emotional discipline, and no ability to tell the difference between falling price and falling value. That is all a panic really is, a collapse in the ability to distinguish price from value. I was buying then not because I enjoyed the noise, not because I thought pain was finished. I was buying because when I looked out 10 years instead of 10 weeks, the value was obvious and the prices were absurd. That difference, price versus value, is the whole game. And if you do not learn that difference before a storm, you will not suddenly master it in the middle of one. That is why preparation matters. The wealth gap of every downturn is not created during the downturn. It is created before it. That is one of the hardest truths in money, because it means the decisive work is almost always boring when you are doing it. It does not feel heroic. It does not make you look sophisticated. There is no applause for getting lean while your friends are upgrading their lives into fragility. But fragility is exactly what most people are buying when times look good. They think they are buying success. What they are often buying is exposure. A nicer car, a bigger house, more subscriptions, more fixed costs, more lifestyle gravity, more evidence to the outside world that they are doing well. All of it creates one thing: dependence. And dependence is the real enemy in a storm. I have seen this play out again and again. A man earns more. Then his life expands to absorb every new dollar as if the money had a moral duty to become visible. Better apartment, better furniture, more restaurants, more little treats, more quiet recurring charges, more expensive tastes in everything from coffee to vacations. He feels successful because the spending matches the story he wants to tell about himself. Then the income stops or shrinks or even just stumbles, and the whole structure suddenly reveals itself as a machine that required constant feeding. This is what most people never learn. Lifestyle is not an asset. Lifestyle is a hunger. Wealth is born in the gap between what you earn and what you allow yourself to need. That gap is not a side detail. That gap is everything. It is where resilience begins. It is where optionality begins. It is where the future starts buying shares in your freedom. The richest people I have known personally have almost all shared one quiet trait. They live beneath what they could afford, not because they are joyless, not because they are misers, but because they understand that every dollar not consumed can become an employee that never asks permission, never sleeps, and never complains. Most people never build enough financial employees because they keep hiring lifestyle instead. You cannot buy freedom by continually increasing the number of things that require your labor to remain alive. That is not wealth. That is upgraded servitude. Now let us talk about debt, because debt is how storms turn from inconvenience into drowning. I want you to stop thinking about debt as just a balance. Debt is a claim on your future labor. It is work you already promised to do on behalf of a past version of yourself who was probably too optimistic. Every dollar of high-interest debt is labor sold in advance at terrible terms. And interest is the insult attached to the deal. The thing people rarely sit with long enough is the true cost of debt. They calculate what they repay. They almost never calculate what that money could have become if it had been put to work for them instead of against them. A few $1,000s on a credit card at ugly rates is not just a few $1,000s. Over time it becomes double, triple. If you count opportunity cost, honestly, that money was not merely spent. It was taken out of future compounding and handed over to the enemy. Compound interest is impartial. It will work miracles for you or devastation against you. The math is the same. The only thing that changes is which side you stand on. That is why I say get lean before you try to get clever. A person with high interest debt, thin cash, and inflated lifestyle cannot think clearly about opportunity, because desperation distorts perception. He sees every headline as personal. He sees every price move as a threat. He cannot buy bargains because he is too busy protecting himself from yesterday's promises. Lean people are free people. Lean people can think. Lean people can wait. Lean people can say no to nonsense and yes to extraordinary moments. That is why every serious plan begins not with investment brilliance, but with structural honesty. Where exactly do you stand? How many months can you last if your income stopped? Not scramble, not borrow, not sell things in a panic. Last how many months could you cover your real life from liquid savings? If the answer is 1 or 2, you are not prepared for a storm. You are merely hoping weather remains polite. Hope is not a plan. If the answer is less than 6 months, then the first major project of your financial life is not stock selection, not macro forecasts, not trying to buy whatever hot thing everyone else thinks is the future. Your first project is time. A 6-month cushion is not just money in an account. It is time for your reasoning to survive. Time to find new work, time to decline a bad offer, time to avoid selling good assets at rotten prices, time to keep your dignity while the world gets louder. You should think about cash reserves the same way a farmer thinks about stored grain before winter. Not as idle as survival converted into patience. And patience in financial life is one of the highest return assets on earth. Now I want to move to the market because this is where many people get hypnotized. Most people think the market reflects the economy. It does not. The market reflects sentiment about the future, not current economic reality. The economy is jobs, production, spending, earnings, energy costs, housing, and all the messy gears that produce actual life. The market in the short run is mood. It is a popularity contest run by fear and greed wearing suits. That distinction matters enormously because a euphoric market can exist over a weakening economic floor for quite a while. It can keep levitating on hope, story, momentum, and concentration, and when enough people have gotten rich fast enough in the same narrow corner, they begin confusing past price action with permanent truth. That is what I see in stretches of this market. I see a concentration problem disguised as innovation. A handful of giant companies have absorbed an extraordinary share of market enthusiasm. People tell themselves that because the underlying technology is real, the prices must be justified. That is lazy thinking. The internet was real in 1999. It still destroyed plenty of investors who paid the wrong price. Technology can be transformative and still be priced stupidly. Those two things are not opposites. They often arrive together. Hope is a beautiful thing in life. On a balance sheet, hope becomes a liability the moment it is priced as certainty. If a company must grow almost supernaturally for years just to justify the current multiple people are willing to pay, then you are no longer investing in excellence. You are investing in perfection. Perfection is expensive. And expensive perfection rarely forgives disappointment. This is where I return to the difference between price and value. A wonderful business bought at an undisciplined price can still become a poor investment for a very long time. That is what people forget when a story gets hot enough. They start thinking quality removes the need for valuation discipline. It does not. Quality matters. Price matters too. Price is what determines whether a good business becomes a good investment or a decade of dead money. That is why I do not worry about sounding old-fashioned. Patience does not need defending. Valuation does not need trend approval. And cash when prices are wrong is not cowardice. It is a coiled spring. Now let me tell you what I would actually do, because insight without instruction is just another pleasant form of procrastination. The first thing I would do is build the full picture. Not a rough idea, not a comforting estimate. The full picture, every monthly expense, every debt balance, every interest rate, every recurring charge you forgot was there, every fixed cost you have allowed to grow roots in your life. Write them down, then answer the only question that matters in a storm. How long can I last? Once you know that number, you stop dealing in fantasy, then you eliminate the bleed. That means high interest debt first. Always first. I do not care how exciting the market looks. I do not care what someone on the internet says is about to triple. If compound interest is currently working hard against you, fix that before you try to become sophisticated elsewhere. Your future freedom is leaking and you are asking me which stock to buy. That is backward. After that, automate discipline. This is one of the great hacks of financial life, and it is so dull that people underestimate it. The decision you make calmly, once in advance, beats the decision you try to make emotionally every month. Set the transfer, save on payday, before your mind gets a vote. If you wait until the month ends to see what is left, life will usually make sure nothing is left. Systems beat moods. Always then prepare to buy. Not blindly, not today at any price. Prepare, make a watch list of businesses you truly understand. Real businesses. Businesses with durable economics, strong balance sheets, understandable products, and futures. You can still imagine 10 years from now. Study them while prices are not yet attractive. Know what they are worth. Know what would make them undeniably compelling if fear cracked the market open. This is what almost nobody does. They wait for the panic first, then try to think. That is backwards. Thinking belongs in calm periods, acting belongs in chaotic periods. If you reverse those roles, you usually end up doing the exact opposite of what wealth requires. I also want to say something about attention, because attention is one of the most looted assets in modern life. The financial media does not get paid when you think clearly. It gets paid when you remain agitated. Fear, excitement, outrage, urgency, envy, all of these states hold attention better than quiet analysis. So during a downturn, the information ecosystem becomes heavily polluted. Useful data is still there, but it is buried under sensationalism, endless commentary, and language designed to keep you emotionally activated. You must protect your mind from that. You do not need no information. You need low-noise information. There is a great difference. Ask one question whenever you consume financial media. Is this helping me better estimate long-term value, or is this just making me feel something? If it is mostly making you feel something, close it. Because emotional stimulation is not investment research. And the people who preserve their minds in a downturn preserve their portfolios more often too. Now let me bring this down to first principles, because that is always where I return when the world gets noisy. Wealth is not the accumulation of things. Wealth is freedom. Freedom to say no. Freedom to wait. Freedom to think slowly in a fast world. Freedom to act when everyone else is frozen. Freedom to buy a good asset when fear knocks 10 or 20 or 30% off the price, and you do not need to ask anyone for permission because you prepared years in advance. That freedom is built in the smallest and least celebrated decisions, the car you do not upgrade, the debt you kill instead of carrying. The savings transfer you automate, the subscription you cancel, the cash cushion you defend from your own impatience, the watch list you build while everyone else laughs at caution. People want wealth to feel dramatic. Real wealth is usually built in quiet refusal. I have lived in the same house since the 1950s. That fact has always told people more about me than any portfolio chart ever could. Not because the house itself matters, but because it reveals a principle. I was never trying to win the theater of wealth. I was trying to preserve the economics of it. Things do not impress me nearly as much as options do, and options are born from restraint. Now, here is the most important point I can leave you with. The wealth gap that opens during a recession is not created in the recession. It is created in the months before it, when preparation still feels optional. That is where we are. In the optional phase, in the phase where people can still talk themselves into waiting. In the phase where comfort is still telling them they have time. In the phase where the boring work of getting lean, getting liquid, and getting mentally ready still feels less urgent than one more dinner out or one more optimistic assumption about the future. This is where fortunes quietly diverge. The prepared are making small decisions now that will look brilliant later. The unprepared are still narrating reasons to delay. That is the difference. Not IQ, not charm, not access. Timing of discipline. I am 95 years old. I have watched war, inflation, panic, crashes, oil shocks, bank failures, bubbles, and periods of confidence. So foolish they almost look poetic. Every cycle ends up teaching the same lesson to people who survive long enough to learn it. The people who prepare are always rewarded, not always immediately, not always on the schedule they hope, but rewarded all the same. Cash matters, low debt matters, valuation discipline matters, clear thinking matters. The storm may come on one timetable or another. It may wear a different face than people currently expect. But the preparation works across almost every version of the future. So here is what I would do if I were starting from scratch and wanted to use the next 90 days. Well, first, know your real number. Months of runway, not guess calculated. Second, cut the bleed, highest interest debt, unnecessary recurring costs. Lifestyle fat, strip them out. Third, automate savings before emotion can intercept the money. Fourth, build your list of real businesses you would be delighted to own at lower prices and study them. Now, while your emotions are still cheap, that is it. Not glamorous, not headline-worthy, not likely to impress anyone who mistakes motion for intelligence, but profoundly powerful. This is not a warning, it is an invitation to be ready, to stop standing in open country telling yourself the clouds will pass because they usually have to put the coat on now, while the sun still pretends it is enough, to become, when the storm finally has a name, the person who is liquid, rational, and able to act. That person always gets offered the best bargains. And in a hard world, being able to act when others cannot is as close to a superpower as finance allows.